Hey guys, David McMurdo put up two videos I wanted to touch on. They're very short and very concise, and I do fully understand that there was some, I'm sure, information left out of them that he would like to have used. I just wanted to supply a answer to some of the things that he brought up and to not leave it like it was unaddressed or something like that. The first one he brought up was the whole the nature of Jesus's body being more supportive of the preterist view than the um, futurist or ideal, whatever other view you want to apply to it. And he also touches on the points that I actually wrote a bunch of notes down, but I don't necessarily want to use every single little word he said. I'm just saying the two major points were kind of the nature of Jesus's body and the fact that we have references to um, people being alive after they're dead in the New and Old Testaments at some point. The first thing I'll touch on is the nature of Jesus's body. Okay, the nature of Jesus's body. The thing I think we have to understand about that when he's the firstborn from the dead. Okay, you first have to ask yourself the question: was he anywhere else but dead? And what did they believe? Well, I think Mary answers that question when she says, "Where have you taken my Lord?" or "Where have you taken Jesus?" She had no understanding and did not think that Jesus was on some other plane of existence. She was looking for the body so she could preserve it for some reason. I would contend it was the physical resurrection. I mean, that is, to me, what the big deal is about the bone boxes that they use. The other thing he touches on is he says that the Lord, well, he says the first Adam became a living soul and the second Adam became a life-giving spirit. Well, I would say we need to define that. And Paul goes on to say later that the Lord is the Spirit. Well, we all know there's one Spirit. And I think where David's point would fall apart is when he makes the reference about Jesus putting on immortality, the clothing language that Paul used. And that to me kind of points out the whole thing right there. It points out the whole thing. Jesus had to put on immortality. That was not a part of him. That was some eternal being, or to me that proves the entire point. And when he's saying the life-giving spirit, that is a special case. I agree with David on that. But he goes on to define it, and that is the Lord is the Spirit, and the Spirit is the only Spirit of God, and he clothed himself with that. And you see now that that is the completion of the image of the invisible God. He is eternal from that point on. He's clothed in immortality. But the key thing to remember here is that it's still his physical body. And I think the term most Christians would use would be glorified body. Okay. And I don't see where that would help the preterist position in any way. It was not him by himself. It was him plus the spirit of his father clothing him in immortality. So the corruptible flesh of Jesus put on the incorruptible spirit of God. And that life-giving spirit, like I said, we have to define what it means. Does it mean he became the life-giving agent of God? He became a force of his own. He became a wind, a breath. And I think, once again, it's kind of like the spiritual death thing, which I'm going to go into next, that's where it falls apart. When you try to define what Paul meant by life-giving spirit. Now, here's the interesting thing. If you look at it, and I always think of it in the sense of Jesus, heaven, okay, is to me more of a dimensional thing. I've never tried to apply it to the physical realm as we know it now. It's like a fourth dimension existence type deal for me. And if Jesus' body could go in and out of walls and this and that and the other, that to me doesn't negate the fact that he's still his body. That body has just been glorified. It's not that body, and it is his flesh. I mean, we do have to remember that no matter which way you want to cut it, we have to remember it was his physical body which had been modified. To me, if the preterist point was correct, he would have left the physical body behind, period. I think that's where the issue does come in. And he made a comment about people making objections to preterism, and he said it's not a preterism that he believes. Well, I watched Willie T's video, and I'm getting to Matthew 24, but that is a much more complex text, and I had my computer messed up and all that, so I had things I had to deal with, but I'm getting to that eventually. But I went to the website that was listed at eschatology.org, and I think that is, I'm sure that David and William both use this website, so I think it's a fair assumption to say they are both drawing from the same well in some senses. But when I went and looked for the spiritual death, we'll enter into the next thing. And the exact literature on this is very hard to find. But it seems to me that the originator of preterism was a Trinitarian. I could be wrong on that, but that's what it seems to me. And when there's a debate between two guys on here, McDonald and Preston, and I'm looking at it, and because like I said, I was looking for spiritual death, and how are they defining this then? And to me, it's the dualistic nature thing. I don't think preterists view spiritual death the way that it was portrayed in David's video. I don't think many Christians view it the way it was portrayed in David's video. What David portrayed was what I portrayed in my spiritual death video series, and that is there's no other aspect to a human being. And even when you have the Shaul incident of Saul, and it tells him who disturbed my slumber. So even then, even though it's a very strange incident in the Old Testament, it's the fact that he was pulled out of nothingness, basically. So what, however that took place, I don't know. It is a very odd text in that it kind of talks in a way that things don't. But so I went looking, and then in this little debate, they start talking about this subject, and there's this little section here. It says, is it true that physical death came as a result of sin, but also does spiritual death? The context and nature of Paul's argument must determine which death is meant here. And I would contend the death he's talking about is this death of this soul, this other you. In this Roman letter, Paul frequently uses the word death without saying which death he means, leaving the reader to determine the context which death he means. And that's from Commentary on Romans, page 120. Robert Whiteside's commentary. In verse 12, Paul is talking about spiritual death, which comes about as a direct result of one's sin. This actually goes against Don's argument that Jesus died spiritually. He uses the tired old argument of Jesus saying, my God, why hast thou forsaken me?" Matthew 27:46, to argue that Jesus died spiritually. Gill wrote, when he is said to be forsaken of God, the meaning is not that the hypostatic union was dissolved, which was not even by death itself. The fullness of the Godhead still dwelt bodily in him, nor was he separated from the love of God. He had the same interest in his Father's heart and favor both as his Son and his mediator. Nor was the principle and habit of joy and the comfort of lost in his soul as man, but he was without a sense of gracious presence of God, and he was filled as the surety of his people with a sense of divine wrath, which their iniquities he now deserved, and which was necessary for him to endure, in order to make full satisfaction for them. From one part of punishment of sin is loss of the divine presence. It goes down. So what I'm saying is, I think they do define it the way that I'm understanding that they're defining it. And it makes a lot of sense if the creator was, this one guy, was a Trinitarian himself. This fully would have been built into the doctrine that man has a soul, quote unquote, a consciousness that is separate from the consciousness of the human body that they have. So that would be just kind of addressing some of the things that he brought up on that. And like I said, I'm going to try and keep these short too. I definitely see the point in doing that. So I'll probably make some other shorter ones about these specific subjects that are brought up here and there. I am working my way to Matthew 24. I got a couple other stops to make on the way to doing that. But that's just a brief response to some of the points, you know, that were brought up in those two videos.